One. Hey there, Alexander. Everyone, welcome back to my channel, Centered Soul. Having a chat with Alexander Fals, a friend of mine from Colombia, beautiful painter, also a life coach, helps many people through some very inspiring conversations. So yeah, thought we'd jump on the YouTube today and have some chats about what's alive for us. So hey man, how you doing?
Hey Zach, how's it going, dude?
Yeah, dude, really
doing
well.
Great.
Awesome. I wanted to introduce the topic today of energy moving between me and you, between self and other, between like how we give to ourselves and how we give to other people. And yeah, what sort of capacities like we've witnessed within the collective consciousness and within our own lives to be able to allow for that movement to take place, or maybe like what sort of restrictions have also come up. How does that concept sort of like sit with you?
So it's kind of a new idea for me. The first thing that came up when you kind of started proposing this idea was something I read in a book, Adult Children of Alcoholics, which was something that I really resonated with. And I think that, probably a grand majority of people from all over the world can. And one of the things that this book was talking about, it was written by a woman named Janet Wowitz, I think was her name. It's like maybe 15 years ago. She was saying that children who are raised in a home where alcohol is abused are raised with this kind of like unreachable, impossibly high standard, because the way that alcoholism affects someone is that it's like this up and down, and they can never get to where they want to go. And there's like this like kind of self-lying where you're like, okay, I'm only gonna have one drink, and then like 4 drinks later you're like, whatever. And the way that children are affected by this, and how children can kind of inherit the behavioral symptoms of alcoholism without even drinking alcohol. And I think in my case, one of those things was this impossibly high standard of never being enough. And so in an intimate relationship, that manifests in trying to be enough, but not knowing what that looks like, and creating some fantastic level that is like, this is what enough must be like, and I'm fucking Superman, which I can't do, obviously, but I don't have any frame of reference, or even worse, the frame of reference that I have is that I have to try so fucking hard because I'll never be good enough,
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really freeing idea, considering my girlfriend has been away for 2.5 weeks, and it was really difficult for me. We spend a lot of time together. We do a lot together. We work on a lot of things together.
Sure.
And I think I've really needed to explore this idea deeper. The idea of self-love in a relationship is totally different than the idea of self-love when you're by yourself.
Absolutely.
And being able to transition those two types of self-love is a whole new skill that I'm excited to grow.
Yeah, I really feel that like allowing for that flourishing, to come up, allowing for like, okay, well, I'm totally feeling all the expectations, all the desires to show up in a way that allows for the best possible self to be seen, or I want to give totally, I want to absolutely devote myself to, whether it is a person or a project, and lose ourselves in that focus and lose ourselves in the moment. Like that is a really beautiful thing to do. But the challenge then comes with, okay, when is it time for that thing to die? When is it the time for that moment to finish, and for us to come back like a wave in the ocean, like it's going, it crashes and then it recedes back, like the breath. Like I've really found this concept to be super liberating, and I guess that's why I'm really passionate about sharing it, because I found like, with my own music, with my own art, with my clients, that I can then zoom so far into being present and to wanting to assist and to wanting to help. And then I can come back and reflect as well and be like, how does that benefit me? Like, what can I take away from this for myself? And it's a beautiful process. Like, I'm sure when your partner comes back, that there will have been some deep growth that you've gone through sitting with yourself, through being with yourself, that then you can gift her those insights, gift her those downloads, gift her those, those little like pieces of awareness that potentially like you wouldn't have if you were together. Like, yeah, there'd be different stuff that would come up and you have a lot of fun, but it's like, hey, check this out. I realized this. Like, isn't that cool? Like, isn't that important? And she can then share those insights that she's had independently. Like, yeah, it's pretty magic. The concept about the alcoholism is really, really curious as well, that these sort of like traumatic childhoods do really, which most people have had some degree of trauma in their childhoods, which has conditioned the way that they relate. And you can see that. You can see in the world that people either overgive or they just focus on themselves, and it's like pure narcissism. It's really the two polarities. Like, it's rare. It's a very rare quality for us to even contemplate or speak about, to find that happy middle ground, to find that space of like, I can totally put myself out there and totally give to you, and simultaneously I can totally give to myself and honor myself. Like, yeah, it's big.
Yep, it is. And I think, what you were saying about what you would have to give after a time of separation might be equal in the opposite sense. Like, if my girlfriend goes away and she has this incredible restorative time, and while she's gone, I'm like, desperately needing her. And so think about that like contrast of like, she gets back and she's like, hey, I have these things to share with you, and I'm like, I'm dying, and that's not good. That's not what I want. I want to be able to share gifts. So
and that
totally
inspires, inspires that opportunity. Like, and yeah, if she were to come back, like, it's not going to happen, but in previous cycles, like, if that were something that had occurred, that would then like trigger this process within you that goes, oh shit, I need to step it up. I need to like she's gone through all this cool shit when she's away. Like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Like where's my willpower to be able to have like cool experiences and realizations? And even that in itself is still a gift, because it allows for self-reflection. It might not have the manifestation that's pretty or that's packaged nicely, but like, it's still something where you're like, okay, there's some value in that, because I can look at what I'm going through and I can look at like what I haven't done. And sometimes it's like having that awareness of what we didn't accomplish is just as important as what we did, because then we can improve on things. We can like modify and adapt our approach in the future, right?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's it for me. It's like, when I think about what I do to indulge my needs, those are the things that need reassessment. Like, instead of eating too much sugar, drinking too much chocolate milk when my girlfriend's away, and then, drinking myself into like a chocolate milk hangover. It's just kind of revisiting that with my new adult self, because to child me, I think that does sound like the most strategic move, like, okay, I'm alone now, it's time for chocolate milk. But
Yeah.
I can think of healthier things to do that would be equally as indulgent and not leave me so exhausted.
Absolutely. How do you, I'm going to change track a little bit. How do you feel that this concept relates to painting, for example? Like we might have just the concept of the A and the B, sort of like the polarity, where you might put on a hell of a lot of color, like in just big block area, and then you might like strip it back and you might make like some more details, and then you might have to like put something really, really harsh on, and then like soften, or like edges. You might really harden the edge and then really soften the edge and then really harden the edge and then really soften the edge. Does that sort of speak to a capacity within your own creative process as well, like of that flow and of that movement between hard and soft, or light and dark?
Um, the association that I think of in painting, which was recently described to me as, the tree of life, kind of being able to look at all the different layers, saying, this is the idea for the painting. This is like the big layer, and then these are all the different. This is the top quadrant and the right quadrant and the bottom left quadrant, and all of these areas, and then this is that detail, or kind of being able to zoom out and see everything, and then zoom in and get intricate. And so I think this is, in some ways, it has elements of that. It's just like, a relationship is a relationship. That's kind of like the idea. But then you start to break it into all these different, like, what is myself with this person? What is myself by myself? And how do all of these things connect to the painting? And so I guess that's kind of the association that I would make with painting, is that it's just a deeper understanding, or a partitioning, in order to bring a finer detail to each piece, and in at the end, the grand total.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, for what I see it, like, I'm just visualizing those beautiful like flower pieces that you did in the pots, like when I was living with you. And you could say that like your partner is like the pot and you're the flower, for example. And you might she might zoom in really, really strongly on the pot and like be like, whoa, I'm gonna work on the pot for a little while and just get those details super, super fine. And that might then give you the opportunity to zoom really deeply into that flower and go, whoa, okay, like I'm gonna get the petals really nice and get the contrast. But then you might zoom out when you come back together and be like, hey, some of those colors need a bit of adjusting because you might have gone like, we're too bright, I might have gone too dull. And now the background, like, how does it fit in with that as well? So then you sort of zoom back in again, and you can work on the flower, you can work on the pot, and there's this like feedback mechanism of relating to these different areas that constitute the same piece, right? And we need to constantly zoom out, as you're saying, like look back at what that whole artwork is to get a reference point. And there needs to be that movement into, okay, I really need to get super accurate with what's going on in this particular area as well. And I don't know, like for me personally, like zooming out and zooming in different areas of my life at a higher frequency sort of allows me to check myself and to look at the feedback of okay, how does this relate to everything that's going on in my life, or with even certain habits, my exercise routine or my meditation routine. I go, okay, if I'm just meditating all the time, then I'm not working on my business, right? Or my health sort of suffers, or my friendships suffer. Or if I'm just calling friends all the time, then I'm not working on my physical health. So like the whole life is like the whole painting. And then when I'm zooming in on certain aspects, like I can't get lost in the details of that particular aspect, as like enjoyable as it would be to just be really refining the petals of a flower. Like I need to look at the whole thing. But then if I'm looking at the whole thing, I'm not getting the details, right? So yeah, it's that movement, I guess.
It's that movement. And I think about a poem. Maybe it's a Khalil Gibran poem, but something about the mountain. You can't see the beauty of the mountain when you're standing on top of it, and it's only when you walk far away can you see its immensity.
Yeah.
And its immensity is that I want to do that. I mean, like this idea of this journey for self-love is, to me, the only journey. Right? It's the only way forward. And I think that's another reason why this is so important because, you know, I get so caught up in the details, and that's what happens in my relationship is
Yeah.
I'm, you know, focusing on the fucking arm hairs of somebody's shoulder, you know, instead of being like, oh no, like this is actually like an entire painting that I like care about, you know.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of silly,
That
but
makes
is
sense.
real in
Yeah.
this situation with my girlfriend being gone. I'm like, you know, how can I bring this back to this is what I love? Like, how can I feel like I'm working on my relationship and giving love to my partner and moving forward with myself when I'm by myself, you know? And what does that really look like? Well, it looks like self management. You know, it looks like making that distinction in between myself by myself and myself with my relationship and how it's connected. You know, it's all one thing. And so being by myself, you know, isn't necessarily stepping away from the painting, which is my relationship. It's
Mhm.
really just kind of stepping back from the piece and saying like, how's it going? You know, how's it look from a couple steps back or something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that always gives us a great perspective, right? You know, like how many times when you are painting do you step back and go like, okay, how does that look? Like a billion
Always
times. Exactly.
a billion fucking
Yeah,
times. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. So
Yeah.
to bring that concept into everything we do in our life, I feel like is extremely rewarding. Extremely
Huh.
rewarding. You know, imagine like even in the education system that like, you know, kids going into like maths for 2 hours, English for 2 hours, you know, like social studies for 2 hours, art for 2 hours, and it's like bang, 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 bang. Like if there was some capacity, like for them to also zoom out, like in if assemblies or something, or like some aspect of the day was to really go, hey, this is why all these aspects of your life are weaving together to create you into the human you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like it would provide a perspective from my awareness that it would have more meaning, like kids would be like, oh, that's why I'm learning that and that and that. It's not just separate pieces, like it's actually building me up into who I am. Like, they might hear that from parents or from, you know, teachers, but unless there's some integrated way for them to spend time, and I believe that's in solitude, then they don't understand what the full picture is. If meditation was to be implemented in schools, then that child would have the time to reflect upon all of the different aspects of their life, because they'd had that separation, they'd had that coming back to their own self as the bigger picture, rather than throwing themselves into all of these different activities and getting lost in it.
Sure. Well, that's the sad thing I think about most public schools is that I don't know, but I think that they, whether on purpose or by, kind of just by design, were made to create factory workers, so it was kind of to do the opposite. And so this idea of reflection of like, hey, is this working for you in alignment with who you are and who you want to be? Like that was never the question. It was really more the opposite of like, how can we break who you are and who you want to be and make it into this like, malleable drone character.
Absolutely.
But also interestingly enough, being a coach, being a life coach, I think, the reason that schools were set up like that, or the fact that schools were set up like that, makes my job super interesting.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, taking that time of reflection and deeply saying, am I okay with this? Am I not okay with this? Is this where I want to go? Is this what I really want? What are my obstacles? It's incredible how transformative those kinds of questions are. They were transformative to me. They continue to be transformative to me. And they're super transformative for the people that I talk to. And it's, simultaneously such a simple idea, yet so profound for so many of us. And that being said, if only schools were organized in a way that allowed for that kind of reflection, what a world we would live in.
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, we'd be out of jobs because we wouldn't be needed as coaches.
We would have different jobs. Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
And that's it. Like, it is beautiful to watch the transformation of clients when we open up these different concepts for them to contemplate. And it's sad at the same time. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, that's awesome that I can really assist you to open that up. And what a world we live in where like no one's ever held space for you to even ask these types of questions. And
yeah,
it's so rewarding, but it's so deeply infuriating and tragic that we're having to, clean up from the industries and the complexes that have ruled this planet. And there is more and more of that happening. This movement towards holistic integrated living is definitely emerging from the rubble of our civilization as it continues to collapse. But like, I like to think that we're better than that, but we're not. that's what pains me. I'm like, isn't human? Are we great human? No, we're not. We're horrible. We're really horrible people, and it's a challenge.
Well, I disagree. I think we've gotten in this argument before, but I try to stay as pro-human as possible.
Yeah, I'm pro-human. I'm anti-industry. And that's the industry.
Fair enough.
Is what dehumanizes us. Like, as you were saying, like the school system creating slaves, like creating robots, like it's an intentional dehumanization. So the people who have unfortunately gone down that pathway very deeply, they're not superhuman anymore. They're not like in that authentic, heartfelt, like that feeling space. It's robotic. It's automatic.
I heard it today. I have to do my research on this, but a colleague said, she was telling me Yoko Ono, a famous Yoko Ono quote is, "Evil is energy mishandled."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's true. It's, we think about the conditions in which the world where we live in today were created, and I don't think it's because people are horrible. I think there's a lot of theories. One of them is caffeine, but yeah, I don't know.
It's a great rabbit hole to go down. Yeah,
totally.
Rabbit hole to go down. Like it comes as well into this. Your environment sort of dictates who you are, and your environment's not just your physical space. It's like everything that you consume, like all food, all media, all conversation with people, like the self-talk that you have, what it's like outside, like it defines us. And for alcohol and caffeine to be the biggest part of our like internal terrain, because this is what people are regularly putting into their system, it changes the neurochemical pathways. Like it changes our ability to perceive reality. It makes us more efficient at being robots that we're being programmed to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, it changes our reality, because I think that's the interesting thing about reality, is that depending on the plant that's affecting our mind, we're in different realities. It was Michael Pollan who introduced this idea to me in the book Your Mind on Plants. The difference between mescaline and the lamplight. That's the name of the single that I put out today, Lamplight. You can find it on YouTube, Alexander Fals.
That's it, man.
But I was just so inspired by that idea of changing, of embracing the reality of infinite possibility that mescaline can bring, and stepping away from this flashlight goal-oriented reality that caffeine brings. I've never had an issue with, I don't actually enjoy caffeine, but I, similarly to inheriting the behavioral characteristics of an alcoholic, I think I inherited the behavioral characteristics of caffeine addicts just because of the society that we live in,
Yeah. I want to come back to as well, like this concept of zooming in. Was just reflecting on all of the different like periods or different classes that we have in schools, right? Like again, coming back to this like maths, English, science. And recently I've changed my sort of schedule. I normally used to get up in the morning and like, you know, do some breath work, do some yoga, do this, like I'd go and have this client, and then I might study for a few hours a certain topic and then have another client. And I've adapted that and simplified it recently where I'm like, okay, I still have my morning practice, you know, still get up and do my exercise and meditate and everything. And I try and just zoom into one or two things for an entire day. And it's been a reinvent for myself where I, instead of like trying to do a little bit every day, you know, I might say Friday for me is purely music production, and that's an entire day. And I'll be on Ableton and I'll be making some cool beats, and that's a full day. And then, you know, I'll have a couple of days where it's just clients, and I'll have a couple of days where I'm just studying or working on my business. And I've found that instead of like trying to do a little bit, which works for some people, you know, some people it's really functional to say, hey, I'm going to do 5 minutes here or 20 minutes here, because they can start that process of self-discipline, and they can start that process of really realizing what's important to them and how to bring those different moments throughout their week and throughout their month, throughout their life. I'm actually able now to zoom in a bit deeper, and I'm like, I need a full day to be able to focus on this, and that those lapses in concentration after, you know, the 40-minute mark, they say, like, or an hour and 20, you sort of need to take a break. I've realized that lapse is sort of like a gear up in a car, you know, like where you'll go from first gear and then you'll sort of plateau out while you're changing gears, and then you can accelerate again, and you plateau out and you got to change gears. And that second sort of hour, that second dive in, is so much more rich. Whereas before I'd sort of do the first gear, change gears, and then I might change and do a different activity. And it's helping me to be able to zoom in really deeply. When I do reflect on my whole week, like it's like lots of flower, lots of petals, take a break. Lots of pot, you know, take a break. And
yeah. I align with that completely. Align with that completely. They say one of the requirements of play is that you lose track of time.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as we know, we are our most creative and productive, and we are growing at our maximum potential when we are playing in a curious way. And when it comes to creativity, like, you know, making music or even coaching, which I think is incredibly creative in this, it's mental gymnastics of just listening and being so open and so inquisitive. There's no way that you can fit that into 45 minutes. And if you have to be aware of the clock, it's like, it just kills the, you know, it kills the recess. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I totally agree with that aspect.
For sure.
For me, I think the morning is like, I do that. I struggle with morning depression a lot. I have for many years, and it's less so now than it was before. But I wake up, but there's a time before I realize where I am and the pain of the morning hits me, and I'm just like kind of awake. And I try to, in that moment, embrace breath. And it's kind of like that crucial moment in the morning where if I don't seek to expel the pain that I have in a productive way, then I'll go instantly like to my phone, you know, and look at something on the phone, or I'll you know, smoke a joint, or like, you know, whatever, something that's just like instantly gratifying. And that sets the tone for the whole day, you know. So it depends. That it's all about where I can set my trajectory. But yeah, I always try to leave room for losing track of time.
Totally. Two things with that. Like, firstly, that pain is what you transform into setting up a really solid morning practice, where you're like, okay, the dread of existence is here. The existential dread's coming knocking on the door again. Here we are. Let's go. We're back, baby. We're not in dreamland anymore. Or maybe we are, but we're here.
Yeah.
And so how am I going to take that and how am I going to do something with myself? Like, how am I going to set up my day right? I used to also
Yeah.
suffer from this, where it was hard. It was hard to get up and participate like in the strongest possible way. And it's still hard, but I force myself to do exercise every morning, and it helps. It helps me to feel positive, helps the energy to move from the night, from the processes yesterday, from clients, from everything else. I can get that energy moving, and then I'm clean and I'm clear and I can move forward. The
Yeah.
other thing that I wanted to get on about is like, yes, the losing of the time is great. And then we have to also make sure still that we have those zoom outs, so we have those moments where we're like, okay, yeah, I'm getting lost in it and I can see the value in this. And that was sort of what I was getting at before. Like, I've transitioned from looking at big picture and little and often, little and often, little and often into like deep dives. And that's why I'm really going into this whole concept of self and other, and in your partner, within your with your relationship, and bringing it back to self, like zooming into these days, zooming into these processes, zooming into these creative channels, taking myself back out. It's harder to do that the deeper we dive. The deeper we go into one thing, it's really difficult to come back to self. And I feel like that's the mastery, like maybe you're going so deep into your dreams because you're such a creative human. I know that you at least like have lucid dreamed in the past, that you're so present in those worlds, and to pull yourself back into this world, that's where the pain is. Like, if we don't go in as deep, it's easier to come out of it. We don't go as deep into relationship, it's easier to come back to self. So where's that happy middle ground between how deep do I go? Because when that thing has to end, when it has to die, when it has to destroy itself, it's going to be painful. But I want to go really deep and experience a lot of pain when I come back to myself. Or do I want to go really shallow? And I feel like that's like different for each person, because how deeply we dive into certain interests or relationships or practices or conversations will dictate like how hard it is for us to come back to our center afterwards. And there's value and merit in going in for a certain depth and coming back to self. And there's also a different level of value with really throwing ourselves off the deep end and coming back to ourselves afterwards. But I found, after a lot of years of going in and coming out, that the more frequently that I'm able to process that death, that to come back to center, the more that those activities have benefited. And now I'm just like fine tuning and finding my sweet spot, like how deep can I go without getting lost in it, or how deep can I go where it's not so shallow that I haven't broken through to find something of worth there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thought. I've heard statistics, I don't know if you're familiar with this, the idea of, women are better at multitasking than men, but they say that, and on average, women are smarter than men, but there's a lot of, or the majority of people who are like genius IQ, or, not a grand majority, but a majority are men. And it has to do with this idea of being like single tracked in your mind. And I guess my concern, considering, like I told you, I always felt like it was pretty much a requirement to be able to have the space to just like forget about time. I mean, what a luxury, but still, it's like, that's when the best work happens. And just like you said, like, I think of it as like building a card house. When I'm painting and I'm imagining something, I can't just stop, because like when I come back, this like card house that I was building in my mind will be gone, and I have to start from the beginning. Like, I can only paint in the 15th hour if I've been painting for 14 hours leading up to it.
Totally.
I can't leave. When I come back, I'm back to hour one,
Totally.
And so I guess I'm wondering about what is, can I afford to lose that ability of losing myself? And what is it? Is there a way that I can facilitate my life that I can do that? And my current relationship, I think, fosters that for me. Like, weirdly, when Haley, my girlfriend, when she's here, we don't actually spend a ton of time together. Like, we're doing other things for long periods of time because we're both artists. but somehow I feel like we just kind of ground each other in that space because we're both kind of rebelling against this idea of like, this is the conventional life. And so we're both just be like, oh yeah, like I was just like gone doing this thing. And she was like, yeah, I was just like gone doing this thing. And then like when we come together at night, we're like, wow, like we're just adventuring in like all these different places. And so for some reason, like when she's not here, it's more dangerous to do that because we like pick up each other's slack or something. We kind of like have each other's anchor in some way, or we just, I don't know. It's a strange concept. And I guess my question in a refined way is, how do we not lose the immensity of that experience? Because I feel like, when you go really deep and you suffer that immense pain of, okay, now the painting's over, this fantasy is over, like that's when the most beautiful paintings are made. And I don't know if it would be tragic to me to think that I'm at a time in my life where, I have to forego these immense creative experiences just to like keep myself sane.
That's the thing, like this is the issue with being a creative type. Like it's a challenge because we have to participate in this world which is hyper structured and hyper caffeinated and is ruled by time. If we want to balance our lives, a lot of artists are very unbalanced. It's known throughout the ages, like it's experienced by both of us, that
Yeah.
it's hard to maintain that bigger picture. And I feel that there is a capacity for us to integrate that. It's just priorities and practice. Yes, we want to dive into creative expression for hours and hours and hours. I commend you for doing 15 hours of painting. I don't dive into anything for 15 hours. I see that my partner does. She'll paint like crazy for ages, and draw like crazy. I see how lost she is. I get lost in piano. I used to more when I was younger than I do now, but I will get lost for hours and hours and hours just improvising and playing and going crazy with it. And there's value in that. And simultaneously, we have to balance all the areas of our life. And that's it. It has to be both. It can't be I'm going all the way into it and neglecting everything else. And it can't also be I'm so, regimented that I can't let myself go and let time go. It has to be those both aspects simultaneously. Coming back to the IQ tests, I'm not sure if these IQ tests test emotional intelligence. It might just be that linear, rational,
Sure.
mathematical, male side of things. And to come and address that point as well of females being seen as more, what did you say, intelligent or creative? I read somewhere.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I read somewhere, I'm not sure, I don't remember the source of it, a few years ago, that the actual corpus callosum, so the nerve endings between the right and left hemispheres of the brain, so where you would see the, quote unquote third eye, that would be, so that interconnecting tissue in between those two hemispheres. In women, it's actually like way more woven together. Men, we sort of have this gap. So the synapses, they're like electrical impulses that travel from the right hemisphere of the brain to the left. They have almost like a half a centimeter more to travel of less interconnected tissue within that corpus callosum than females do. So this is why women actually can feel and think simultaneously. They can't separate thoughts and feelings. Like they'll be thinking about something and they'll also be feeling. They'll be feeling something, they'll also be thinking really deeply. And for men, we have the capacity to grow those nerve endings, which is I find really interesting, that we can strengthen those pathways inside of our own capacity to interlink our neural processes, to interlink our thoughts and feelings in a deeper way. I would almost guarantee that women have a more balanced outlook on these same type of conversations than we do. I could even propose to you, like, look at the way that Haley operates and look at the way that you operate, and she's bringing in, I don't know her, but I could feel into the fact that just from that capacity alone, she would be bringing in that bigger picture approach and zooming in in a more balanced way than what you are, because I know for myself with my partner, she has a more balanced approach to these things than I do as well. And it's something that I feel as men that we do need to bring in a deeper way, that zoom in and the zoom out, that like self-care practices, the, you know, the exercise, the food, like the interconnecting with other people and balancing that, and deeply penetrating our passions in a super, super intense way. But there's got to be that harmonization. I do deeply believe that the higher octave of human evolution is, yes, first of all, to let go of the rational, structured way of doing things. Number two, to let go of time and to zoom into these amazing creative processes. At level three, to come back then to structure and to integrate that timeless space into the time full space, and to have this composite that we don't witness anywhere near as much. I believe it is a three-step process of structure and time, releasing structure and time, but then coming back to that structure and time at a higher octave where we've experienced the timeless, and we can integrate that into a well-rounded and holistic and balanced life.
I love it. I love it. It really is reminding me of an idea that is proposed in this book, The Dawn of Everything. I'm forgetting the author's name right now. I just started reading it. And it talks about, it's kind of like in league with the Noah Yuval Harari Sapiens books, like about human history. And in, I think it was in Sapiens, you know, he kind of introduces, or at least alludes to, this idea that it was with agriculture that came government and civilization. And this book is kind of goes past that and says, actually, humans lived for a really long time before agriculture, and they still had government. And that a lot of people lived, like, you know, if you lived anywhere where the seasons really changed, like you would be a hunter gatherer in the summer, and then you would make a dwelling in the winter. And, you know, so just this kind of natural state, or maybe, you know, a formative place for humanity. And making that comparison into saying, you know, because, or a lot of us, you know, are so stationary for such a long period of time, we don't have that experience of, I mean, you know, I feel like the music festivals of the summer was kind of like that. You know, it's like in the winter you stay home, and then in the summer you go out, you go camping, and you do fires, and, you know, you go on adventures. This was pre-pandemic, right?
Exactly.
So it's good. It's good to make that connection in so many different areas of my current experience, and then relating it to my ancestors who, you know, were just as cool as we were, you know.
Totally. Yeah, I love that there's still that integration of time. See, outside of the, you know, industrial, like, crazy complexes that, you know, govern our worlds, outside of clock time, outside of, like, you know, being on the phone call for however long, and, you know, the phone telling me that it's almost midday, that there is the natural cycles of time which still govern us. And as much as we want to zoom in on a topic, we want to zoom in on painting, we got to sleep at some point. Like, even the body clock goes like, hey dude, like, if you're going to paint for 3 days, it'll collapse if you don't sleep.
Totally. And an
interesting, has to be the integration.
Yeah, I agree. An interesting insight to what this book was saying is that in these different places, there's a different kind of government. So it was kind of trying to understand. The book is about, like, equality and what equality means, and government, and, like, how that formed, and the indigenous critique on Europe, and how Europe changed after coming to the New World, and all this cool stuff. But that's the interesting thing, is that when they were free and in their hunter-gathering time, a totally different form of government was implemented. And then when they come together to live together, same thing, you know, completely different rules of the game. And so it's cool how, you know, how flexible these early people were.
Yeah, totally.
And it kind of, like, paves the way to, you know, a structure into trying to navigate the development of these things that we're talking about, you know, self and other.
Absolutely. It's a
And
higher level concept as well, where we were tribal, we were, living like by the sun, by the moon, by the stars. We were living in a very free state. And now we're super controlled, we're super enslaved, we're super depressed, we're super caffeinated, we're super drunk, and we're all suffering. And so now see at the higher octave, these are 1, 2, 3. So now we can go back to hopefully some of those more indigenous free mindsets, but we're not going to let go of society completely. We're not going to let go of hot water in our showers. We're not going to let go
well,
of our, like many of the comforts that
yeah,
we have. So there is still that integration of the old way of doing things, the going by the sun, going by the moon, like having that free sort of government structure to control and all of the beautiful things that society has to offer us, education systems, healthcare, in certain countries, depending on where you live. But there is those benefits.
diseases.
Yeah.
Totally.
There's a lot of downsides, but there's benefits too.
Well,
so then the third
it's interesting
stage is that higher octave. It's the integration of both. It's a newness.
So
because we
can I
can't
jump in? I want to jump in.
Yeah.
Totally. I want to be careful here because this brings up a really important point that I'm learning and that I really like, which is that, and it's tough, I don't totally disagree with you, and it's taken me a long time of development of trying to understand this, but I really want to try to look at those ancestors, those times, those people as exactly like me. Because one of the critiques that this gentleman makes about Noah Yuval is that he compares our ancestors to chimps and baboons more than bands of bikers or traveling gypsies. And it's like, we have to stop looking at these people as if they were some like ancient relic, some like human, some object of our scientific lens, and look at them as like our brothers and sisters. Our parents are us.
Sure.
And so yeah, less about the distinction of saying like, oh, it was so great back then and now we're screwed. I think more it's just saying like, wow, look at how these people exactly like us dealt with the experience of life, and they would transition back and forth into these different times and places, and they would implement different forms of government. And this is what ours, this is like where we come from, and this is and they had better teeth, so maybe we should try to learn from them.
For sure. I'm not saying that we're completely screwed right now. That's why I'm still proposing and putting forward that there are very advanced benefits for living in the current society and the current life that we're in. My proposition with this is that we can integrate at a higher octave the teachings of old and the teachings of now to synthesize a new form within our future. So I'm sure these antiquated like societies and government systems were still drawing us upon something that they had integrated from times past. Like we can't progress forward in life without different reference points. And the whole concept of failing forward really for me hits a deep place. It's okay, we as a collective species tried something, certain aspects don't work, so those will be let go of, and we might reintegrate things that worked previously, and certain aspects do work, so we keep those and we continue developing with them. And that's why we see the experience of life over time change and morph and adapt and go down really dark places and go into really light and advanced and beautiful places. And whether that advancement is just the creation of fire, or the advancement is,
sure,
iPhones, like who knows? Like there's different manifestations of swinging that pendulum, of looking at the past, looking at where we're at now, and then developing the future as a higher octave. And like the moon cycles, or like tides, or like menstrual cycles in women, like there is this movement constantly from full to empty to back to full, and it's this breath constantly where we have to look at how things were, look at how things are now, and adapt to create something new for the future. And there's not a regression and it's not a denial of where we're at currently. It's just simply an integrative flow. And
Yeah.
it's awesome. I really feel that like both of us have this concept anchored to some degree. And that's why we have an ability to look at how the world is, to feel very deeply how it's affecting everyone, how it's affecting us, and to, even on a small level, implement and bring in things that we see that are valuable that people could benefit from. Like in coaching, how we're bringing in just that peaceful presence and that capacity to listen, the capacity to ask questions, because we see that it's missing, that it was something from my awareness that was very present in tribal culture in times of old, even 30, 40 years ago, people sat and they listened to one another, like the families were more interconnected. We've lost that through connection of social media and everything else. So to bring that piece back, we're not going back to sitting around the kitchen table and eating a roast dinner on Sundays, which would be nice, but we're not doing that. We're taking that idea of active listening and implementing it at a higher octave. And yeah, unless I feel like I'd like to wrap it up there. So do you have any sort of like final remarks or comments? Like, let's dive into that and then we'll sort of bring things to a close for today.
That sounds fine.
Yeah.
The sound of you saying roast dinner in an Australian accent just makes it sound so much more delicious. Yeah, I'm gonna head to the kitchen, I think, after this and see if I can't rustle up some grub.
Makes sense, man. Do you have anything else you'd like to share as far as this conversation goes?
I would just like to say thank you for the invitation. Honestly, a pleasure, and I look forward to many more.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alexander. And guys, yeah, I will put the link for this beautiful man's music and art creation in the description box below, so you can reach out to him. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Look forward to more insightful and wild chats with the beautiful people that I've connected to in my life. Thanks for tuning in.